The table was beautifully set, filled with laughter and toasts, but the truth became clear when the manager slid 2 checks across the surface, one for each of my brothers, zeros on the right shining like sharp knives. It was a day of celebration, but I felt unwelcome at the family gathering. I looked at the empty space where my rights should have been, as injustice suffocated me. They were laughing, but I felt the world crumbling around me. My name is Isadora. I'm not just a spectator in my own story. The room was full of laughter, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. The checks gleamed with promises, but their joy wasn't mine. I had hoped that, perhaps, this day could be different, that the family reunion would symbolize unity, but the reality was a cruel reminder of my exclusion. Each smile from my brothers felt like a sharp blade, cutting deeper into my heart. Eduardo, my older brother, was radiant, but I noticed a shadow in his gaze, a hint of anger he couldn't fully hide. He had felt betrayed before, and now, with the revelation of the checks, his expression grew heavier. While the adults chatted animatedly, I stepped away slightly, searching for a corner where I could breathe. Why don't they think of me? I asked myself, feeling the pain of abandonment. The idea that family love was unconditional was being dismantled right before my eyes. Looking out the window, I saw the sun setting, and a sense of despair began to settle in my chest. Am I really part of all this? I thought, as a wave of sadness enveloped me like a heavy cloak. The image of my mother, Helena, strong and protective, flashed in my mind. She had always been the rock of our family, but now I wondered if she truly understood what was happening. It wasn't just about money, it was about love and acceptance. I decided I needed to confront the situation. My parents were talking in a corner, and I watched them, wishing that, for once, they would speak about me with the same passion they expressed discussing Eduardo's future and ambitions. My father, Carlos, always seemed trapped in a maze of secrets. There was something in his eyes that told me he knew more than he was willing to reveal. I can't let this go, I thought, and I headed toward them, determined to bring to light what tormented me. Why don't we talk about the checks? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Helena looked at me in surprise, as if she had just woken from a dream. Carlos, on the other hand, looked away. The silence that followed was deafening, as if the air was heavy with all the unspoken words. Isadora, now is not the time, Helena replied, trying to soften the situation, but I wouldn't let that happen. I was tired of being ignored, tired of being the daughter who was sidelined. When will it be the right time, Mom? What if it never comes? I'm part of this family too, my voice rose, and the room, once filled with laughter, now turned into a silent battlefield. All eyes turned to me, and I realized I was exposed. Eduardo looked distressed, and I wondered if he felt the same pain I did. What could unite the family if not the truth? My eyes searched his, but he avoided my gaze. Isadora, it's not that simple, Carlos said, finally breaking the silence. There was a weakness in his voice that I hadn't expected. These checks represent an opportunity for your brothers. It's help, something that has nothing to do with you. His words fell on me like stones. It was exactly what I feared, an empty justification that didn't take my feelings into account. What did it mean to be part of a family that didn't recognize my worth? But what do I represent, Dad? What do you want me to do? Stand by and watch while you benefit and leave me behind? I asked, my throat tightening. I needed them to understand the depth of my pain, that it wasn't just about checks, but about love and consideration. Helena glanced at Carlos, and a shadow of worry crossed her face. I knew they needed to talk, but what could be revealed in that dialogue? Isadora, I always wanted to protect you, Helena began, with a sincerity that made me hesitate. Life is complicated, and I always thought that if you didn't know, you wouldn't get hurt. Her words echoed everything I had heard before, but there was a fragility in them that stirred something within me. Do you really think protecting me means excluding me? I'm strong enough to handle the truth, Mom. Eduardo stepped closer, the tension between us almost palpable. "You don't know what we went through," he said, his voice low but filled with emotion. "You might think it's just about checks, but it's much deeper." The expression on his face told me there was more at stake than just our family relationship. He had always been the rebel, and now he was opening up in a way I never expected. Aunt Lucia, who had been silent until then, decided to intervene. "You all need to understand that what's at stake here is not just money, but the family legacy," she said, looking directly at me. The mention of legacy sent a chill down my spine. What did that mean for me, who was being left out? The weight of the past seemed to press down on each of us, and the tension in the room grew like a storm about to erupt. What did Aunt Lucia know that we didn't? The room was filled with tense glances and contained murmurs, and I felt each breath become heavier. I looked at Eduardo, who stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if trying to escape the reality surrounding us. He had always been the protective brother, but in that moment, his expression overflowed with frustration and betrayal. She can't just ignore what's happening, I thought, recalling how he had always been the first to stand up for me, defending me against the injustices life threw our way. Now, the pain in his gaze felt like a sharp blade cutting through our connection. Helena, my mother, stood by the table, her hands clenched into fists. She was the rock of our family, always ready to protect her children with all her might. But now, the shine of determination that once lit up her face was overshadowed by uncertainty. "What exactly is happening here?" she asked, her voice firm, though a slight tremor betrayed her bravery. The restaurant manager, with a nervous smile, began to explain the origin of the checks, but her words seemed to echo hollowly, as if something greater was at stake, something that couldn't be expressed in mere numbers. Carlos leaned forward, his shoulders tense, as if he were carrying an unbearable weight. I knew he held secrets, but I never thought they would affect us so directly. His gaze made me feel he was also struggling with guilt, but what hurt me the most was the sense that he was fighting against a past he didn't want to share. Silence dominated the room, and the anxiety became almost palpable. "Why don't we talk about this? Why are we letting a stranger decide our future?" Eduardo's voice finally broke the silence with an intensity that made me shiver. The manager hesitated, as if her words were on dangerous ground. "The checks are directed toward a project related to the family history, a legacy that you all don't completely understand yet." The way she pronounced legacy made me uneasy, as if the word carried a weight that enveloped us all, as if there was a hidden meaning we weren't ready to confront. I glanced quickly at Eduardo, his expression revealing confusion and anger, and I realized he too felt that this story was far from over. "Legacy? What legacy? What else have you hidden from me?" Eduardo shot back, his voice rising. And in that moment, the tension exploded. Helena looked at him and her features hardened. "You don't know everything, Eduardo. There are reasons for the decisions we made. Please try to understand." I wanted to scream. I wanted the truth to be exposed, but at the same time, I felt a desperate need to protect my family from the consequences of their actions. The dilemma consumed me from within, and I felt lost between the desire to know and the need to belong. Aunt Lucia, who had been quiet until then, decided to chime in. "Do you think you're being excluded? The truth is, there has always been a divide in this family, and these checks are just the tip of the iceberg." Her words cut like a knife, and the room fell silent again as the idea of a family feud settled among us. I tried to process what she had said, but the confusion only grew. What exactly did she know? What else had been hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly normal lives? Carlos's expression twisted, as if each word from Aunt Lucia was a blow to his past. "This isn't what you think, Lucia. We all have our burdens." His voice became a whisper, and his fragility made me feel a wave of empathy. He had always been the type of man to carry the weights of life without complaint, but now I saw a side of him I had never seen before, a side that was broken, vulnerable. It made me question, how much could he bear? What else was he hiding from us? Helena took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. We need to come together, no matter what is happening. What's at stake here is our family. I wanted to believe that was true, but frustration grew within me. How could we unite when lies and betrayals began to unfold before our eyes? The connection we had always shared seemed to be unraveling, and the idea that everything could change in an instant filled me with anguish. The truth was that, even if I wanted to believe we were stronger together, the division between us was becoming evident. I looked at each of them, seeking support, but what I found were gazes filled with doubt and distrust. If our family story was about to be revealed, I needed to find out where I fit into this puzzle. I resolved that I could not wait any longer. If there's something we need to know, then let's say it now, I declared, breaking the silence that enveloped us. My heart raced as all eyes turned to me, and the room seemed to be suspended in a moment of expectation. Whatever was about to be revealed could change everything, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. But one thing was clear: the truth had to come to light, even if it meant confronting the demons of the past. I knew that, regardless of what happened, I could not continue living in a world of lies and omissions. This was the moment to decide our family's future, and I was willing to fight for it. I looked at the checks, my heart pounding faster. The restaurant manager, with a smile that seemed forced, continued to explain how those amounts would be allocated to projects benefiting the family. But with every word she spoke, I felt the distance between me and my parents widened. I looked at my father, Carlos, and saw his expression harden as he ignored my gaze. The feeling of betrayal became unbearable, and the image of Helena, my mother, trying to keep calm, made me realize that this meeting was more than just a family gathering. It was a battleground where Carlos's secrets and Eduardo's pain intertwined with my quest for acceptance. Eduardo had always been the perfect child, the one who not only met expectations but surpassed them, while I, the youngest daughter, struggled to find my place. His look, filled with frustration, did not go unnoticed. He clearly felt out of place, as if the world we had built together was collapsing. He had always known something was wrong. The hushed conversations between our parents, the furtive glances they exchanged, and most importantly, the silence that hung in our home, all of it felt like a storm ready to explode. When my mother asked Eduardo and me to sit at the table, the tone of her voice sounded more like a command than an invitation. "It's not just the table that's meant for relatives," Eduardo murmured, almost to himself, but I could hear the bitterness in his words. He stood up abruptly, as if the mere mention of belonging had wounded him deeply. I wondered what had changed between us, if we were really a family or just a group of strangers tied by blood and secrets. If we are relatives, why are we so different? Why don't I feel part of this? The tension was palpable, and I felt I had to intervene. "Eduardo, you are part of our family. You always have been. We can't let this tear us apart." But his response was as cold as steel. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the pain and disillusionment in his eyes. "You don't understand. It's not about you or me. It's about what our parents are hiding." Those words echoed in my mind, and I realized Eduardo was right. I knew there was something dark in our family history, something I had always wanted to ignore. But now, cornered by the revelations, I knew I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. My mother's gaze, though protective, was shrouded in a sadness I had never noticed before. "Helena, what's going on? What are you and Dad not telling us?" The question slipped from my lips, heavy and laden with expectation. She hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Now is not the time, Isadora. There are things you don't need to know right now." I felt her words were a barrier between us, an attempt to protect me from something I needed to understand. But the truth wasn't something that could be ignored forever. If not now, then when? I was tired of waiting for answers that never came. Carlos stood up, his expression transforming into a mask of anger and desperation. "It's not what it seems. You have no idea what happened, what I did." His shout reverberated through the restaurant, drawing curious glances from other customers. What had he done? What could be so terrible that it compelled him to hide the truth from us? The atmosphere around us felt like a prison, and I sensed that everything could collapse at any moment. Eduardo, once again, couldn't contain himself. "Then tell us, Dad. If you don't open up to us, we'll never have peace. You're destroying our family with your secrets." The tone of his voice rose, and I saw how frustration and fear mingled in his expression. The fear of losing the family, of losing the connection he had always thought we had. My own determination grew, and a new idea began to form in my mind. Perhaps it was time for me to be the voice of reason, even if it meant confronting my parents in the harshest way possible. "We need to talk about this," I said, resolute. "If we keep hiding things, we'll end up losing ourselves even more." Helena's gaze softened, and for a brief moment I saw a spark of hope in her eyes. "Let's be honest. What's really at stake here?" It was as if those words had triggered something within her. Carlos took a deep breath, as if preparing for a deep dive. He looked at me, then at Eduardo, and for a moment the tension seemed to dissipate. "I have a past I'd prefer not to share. I don't want you to carry this burden. But the truth is that my silence could have consequences far more severe than anything I could have revealed." What he had said was an invitation to vulnerability, and I was ready to accept it. We needed to break the chains that bound us to the past, even if it meant facing the pain that separated us. The family gathering was transforming into a turning point. I could feel the atmosphere changing, and a new determination blossomed in my heart. It was no longer about hidden traumas, but about building a new narrative, one that united us instead of dividing us. The checks the manager presented were not just a symbol of hope, but also a painful reminder of the divisions that existed between us. As I watched my parents' faces, I realized the internal struggle each of them faced. Helena's expression, firm and resolute, revealed the strength that had always characterized her, but now there was an underlying fragility she couldn't hide. Carlos, on the other hand, seemed lost in thought, as if trying to decipher a puzzle that had become too intricate for him long ago. I felt like a stranger in the midst of that scene, a shadow apart from the intense light emanating from the checks, but not illuminating my heart. Eduardo was silent, his gaze distant and filled with frustration. The betrayal he felt was not just about the checks, but a lifetime of feeling sidelined, as if I, the youngest, had taken on a role he had always thought should be his. He had become a stranger in our own home, and at the same time, I was the only one who seemed to be ignoring the abyss that separated us. I decided I could no longer remain silent. It was time to confront not only the hidden secrets, but also the pain that had driven us apart. Why aren't we part of this? The question slipped from my lips before I could think twice. My eyes turned to the manager, but were soon drawn back to Eduardo's expression, which seemed ready to explode. Helena frowned, her protective instincts clearly activated, while Carlos looked away, unable to face the reality I had laid on the table. Why can't we be included in the decisions that shape our future? Eduardo supported me, though his support was laced with bitterness. "It's easy for you to talk about a future that doesn't include us. We've always been a burden to you, haven't we?" His cutting tone echoed through the hall, and I felt each word hit like a blade, striking not just me, but also our parents. Helena took a deep breath, clearly struggling against the tide of emotions threatening to spill over. "That's not how I see things, Eduardo," Helena said, trying to stay calm. "You are everything to me. I did what I thought was best for our family. I've always done that. But her words sounded hollow, and I knew there was more to them than just intention. Carlos finally looked at us, and for a brief moment, I saw a man filled with pain and regret. "You don't understand," his voice trembled. "I was trying to protect you from a past that still haunts us. The checks, the decision not to include you, all of it was about what we did to survive." His words echoed in my mind, and frustration grew. It was as if he were trying to justify everything, but the truth was I wanted to be part of this, not a spectator in a play that excluded me. Eduardo, still furious, turned to me. "It's easy for you to take a stand like this, Isadora. You don't know what it's like to feel excluded from your own family. You're the favorite." His accusation weighed like an anchor, and my heart broke. That wasn't what I wanted. That wasn't what I was seeking. I didn't want to be the favorite. I wanted to be part of the solution. The room fell silent, and the tension between us grew with each passing second. I decided I could no longer remain silent. We need to talk about this. We need to understand each other. If we want to heal these wounds, we need to face the truth, no matter how painful it is. Helena looked at me, and I saw the struggle in her eyes. "Isadora, you're right. But often, the truth is harder than it seems. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Her vulnerability was palpable, and it made me realize that behind her strength, there was a woman who was also battling her own demons. "We're all ready for this, Mom," I said, seeking the connection I so desperately desired. "We can't go on like this. If we don't confront what's in front of us, we will never be a complete family." The emotion of the scene intensified, and I felt that the weight of our history could finally be lifted. Carlos stood up, his posture stiff, and I knew he was about to make a choice. He needed to decide between keeping secrets or finally unleashing the truth that could unite our family once again. The silence was heavy, and I wondered if, in that crucial moment, he would be able to be the father he had always wanted to be, or if he would remain trapped in the past that had tormented him for so long. Carlos took a deep breath, as if the air was laden with all the memories he had kept hidden. I didn't know what to expect, but the tension between us was palpable. Helena, by my side, looked at him with an expression that mixed worry and hope. Eduardo, in a corner of the room, maintained a distant gaze, as if preparing for a battle only he seemed to perceive. I felt that the conversation about to happen was more than just about the checks. It was about everything that separated and united us at the same time. "The checks aren't what you think," Carlos began. His voice firm, but with a slight tremor that revealed how much it affected him. He looked at me and Eduardo, as if weighing his words, trying to find a way to protect us from the pain he knew was coming. "I made choices in the past, and those choices brought us here." "Choices? You mean lies," Eduardo interrupted, his words coming out like a shot. The anger in his voice was palpable, and I could see the pain etched on his face. It was as if he were freeing himself from a burden he had carried for years, and I didn't know whether to support him or try to calm him down. I just wanted all of this to end. Helena took the lead, her voice calmer but filled with determination. "Carlos, we need to be honest. This is what Isadora and Eduardo deserve. We can't keep hiding the truth." The strength in her posture was admirable, but at the same time, I wondered if she was truly ready to hear everything that was to come. "You both don't understand. I did what I had to do to protect our family." Carlos's expression hardened, and I realized he was battling ghosts that had never let us be at peace. The atmosphere in the room was charged with electricity, and each of us seemed to be at a different point in our emotional journey. "Protect or hide?" Eduardo replied, his voice filled with desperation. "You don't see that your lies are only driving us apart? Look at us, Dad. We are completely shattered." His desperation hit me like a punch to the stomach. I didn't want to see my family in pieces, but at the same time, I knew the truth needed to be revealed. I felt a knot form in my throat, and I knew I needed to speak. "Dad, please, if there's something we need to know, we can't go on like this. This table is for all of us, and the truth must be part of it. My gaze met Carlos's, and I realized that in that moment, he saw himself reflected in me, just as I saw him. The weight of the past pressed down on both of us. Carlos hesitated, his expression softening for a brief moment. I set aside many things. Decisions I made to secure our future resulted in secrets that are now consuming us. His voice faltered, and I realized that each word was a monumental effort. He was not just shedding lies, but a part of himself that had long been hidden. "What is the secret?" Helena asked, her voice tense. The atmosphere was about to crumble under the weight of expectation, and I knew the answer could change everything. I felt that the revelation approaching could be the key to our redemption or the end of our family unity. Carlos took another deep breath, and I wondered if he was truly prepared to open the Pandora's box he had kept closed for so long. There was a time I made a deal that affected all of us, and that deal was made with someone I never expected would cause so much harm. He looked at Eduardo and then at me, as if measuring the impact of his words. Eduardo, visibly anxious, intervened. "You're talking about Aunt Lucia, aren't you?" "She's the one who brought those checks. What else haven't you told us?" His expression was filled with confusion and anger, and I realized he felt betrayed not only by our father, but by the entire structure that family represented. "Yes, it's about her," Carlos confirmed, his voice now lower, almost a whisper. "I met her at a vulnerable moment, and she offered me a solution that seemed perfect at the time. I didn't understand the ramifications of what that would mean for all of us." The truth began to take shape like a looming shadow, and I knew the light of understanding could burn us. Helena closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to absorb it all. "These checks, they aren't just money. They're a broken promise, a lost opportunity." Her words echoed in the room, and I realized we were all on the brink of an emotional abyss, about to take a step that could either unite us or divide us forever. "We need to decide what to do with this," I said, trying to bring clarity to the chaos. "We can't keep living in the shadow of your choices, Dad. We need to find a way together." The idea of unity, even in the face of pain, seemed to be the only beacon in the approaching storm. The room fell silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. And for a brief moment, the hope for a new beginning felt tangible. I knew that the journey to the truth would be difficult, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was the only way to heal the wounds that divided us. It was time to choose between the pain of the past and the promise of a future together. The tension hung in the air, like a thread ready to snap. Looking at Helena's face, I perceived a mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, and a silent determination that had always accompanied her. I knew my mother wouldn't easily be defeated. At her side, Carlos seemed smaller, as if the weight of his secrets was finally starting to manifest in his body. It was a visible internal battle. The protective figure I had always known now showed cracks. And the fragility of our family core became more evident with each passing second. Eduardo was quiet, his expression that of a betrayed man. I felt he saw himself as an exile in his own home, surrounded by those who should be his family but seemed to have drifted away from him. "It's all a farce," he suddenly shouted, breaking the silence, his voice slicing through the heavy air. "You think I don't notice? What once united us has crumbled because of secrets you haven't had the courage to tell." His frustration reverberated through the room, and instead of dissipating the tension, it only intensified it. It was at that moment that Aunt Lucia entered, like a storm that could not be predicted. "What's happening here?" she asked, her probing gaze assessing the situation. I hated her for her ability to sow discord, but I also knew she brought the raw truth, and that made everything even more complicated. When she looked at Eduardo, I could see something in her expressions that stirred painful memories. "Oh, Eduardo, you've always been the most sensitive of the family, haven't you? Why don't you ask Dad about that night?" Her words were like daggers, provoking a shocked look from Carlos. The atmosphere was charged, and I didn't know whether to intervene or remain silent. It was a game of raw emotions where the wound was exposed, and all participants were called to join the dance. "Enough," I yelled, my voice rising above the confusion. "Enough of secrets, enough of lies. We need to talk about all of this before it's too late." To my surprise, the determination in my voice made everyone look at me, and for a moment I felt strong, as if I were finally taking the reins of the situation. Helena took a deep breath, and I could see she was preparing to defend Carlos. "Isadora, there are things you don't understand. Life is more complex than it seems, and we don't always have the power to control the circumstances," she said. But my mother had never been good at hiding the vulnerability that lurked behind her armor. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you open up? Do you really think that protects us?" My words seemed sharper than I had intended, but I needed them to resonate. Carlos looked at me, and in his eyes there was a profound sadness, as if he knew I was just beginning to understand the extent of his mistakes. I wanted to protect you," he murmured, each word coming out with difficulty, as if a massive weight rested on his chest. "But sometimes what we do to protect ends up hurting even more." I didn't know if I could believe him, but there was a truth in his vulnerability that made me hesitate. Eduardo seemed to be locked in an internal battle, anger and pain mixing in his gaze. Protecting from what? From ourselves? From the choices we made? "Look where we are now, Dad. The house is in ruins because of the secrets you kept." His voice overflowed with indignation and hurt, and I realized he felt like a true stranger in his own home. The bond that had once united us was unraveling, and we were all on the brink of an emotional collapse. Aunt Lucia, aware that the storm was about to reach its peak, decided to take a stand. "You all need to understand that the truth can be painful, but it's the only path to freedom. What happened that night was not just a tragedy, it was the beginning of everything that followed." Her words provoked silence, and I realized she was referring to an event I didn't even fully know about. Curiosity and the need to know consumed me, but at the same time, a deep fear began to creep into my heart. "What night, Aunt Lucia?" I asked, feeling a growing urgency within me. It was as if every word she uttered could change the course of our lives. The expression on her face transformed, and I realized she was about to reveal something that could finally shed light on the shadows hovering over our family. Eduardo's eyes were fixed on her, and even Carlos seemed more attentive, as if he was about to open up. "That night, you lost more than you imagined," Aunt Lucia said, her tone heavy as lead. "And the truth is that many of the problems you face today have roots in that event. Denial has only led to separation, to suffering, and now it's time to confront it head-on." Each of her words was an invitation to dive into a past that had long been buried, and I didn't know if I was ready to face whatever it was. The gazes were fixed, emotions simmering, and the room felt like a battlefield where each of us held our weapons, ready for confrontation. The only certainty I had was that no matter what happened, I could no longer hide from the truth. It was time to open my eyes and confront not only Carlos's secrets, but also my own fears and insecurities. The idea of moving forward without resolving all this felt unbearable. Deep down, I knew that regardless of what was revealed, I would still love my family. But the question echoing in my mind was, how far would this loyalty be tested?